Story 1. The Estate Apparition. I was home from college, and I was driving on what had become something of an abandoned road in my town. I was with a young lady, and we were just driving around, talking, having a good time. When we drew near the old Parker estate, a large deserted mansion that sat on a hill a far distance back from the road, we were driving by the main gates of the mansion when I saw something dart in front of the car. I wasn't sure what it was, but my companion had seen it as well. A few seconds later, we both heard a thump, which made me think that we had hit whatever it was we had saw. We stopped. We got out of the car to see what we had hit and if it was hurt, but there was nothing anywhere around the car, neither in the road or in nearby ditches. I decided to get a flashlight out of the trunk and have a look around. Once we had light, I glanced up at the hilltop where the mansion sat. I saw a man's silhouette standing alongside a tree at the top of the hill. The man was backlit, but his shape was clearly visible. I flashed my light at him, and when I did, he disappeared. When I moved my light away from him, he became visible in the shadow again. I did this 2 or 3 more times, moving the light on and off the figure, and each time you would see the man's shadow when the light was not shining directly at him. The tree was not large enough to hide a person. He could not possibly have ducked out of the beam of my light quickly enough. I asked my companion if she saw what I was seeing, and she said that she saw the man too. I was certain it was a man, not a bush or a tree or something merely resembling a man. It was a man. It was about that time that we decided to get out of there. As I turned to open the driver's side door, I looked down at the left rear fender, and I saw clearly an elongated handprint, as if somebody had reached up from ground level and slapped their hand against the car while it was in motion. The handprint had not been there earlier this evening. My companion and I got into the car and we left in a hurry. I don't know if anyone else has seen or heard of anything unusual happening there, but we did, and I try to avoid that place now. Story 2. The Haunted House. I grew up in a haunted house my father purchased in 1966. It had not been lived in for quite some time. Some of the things that started to occur in the beginning. My father was sanding the bedroom floor and heard who he thought was my mother running up the hallway staircase. He yelled out to her, but no one was there. He felt someone watching him when he returned to the bedroom. Another day, he heard what sounded like footsteps running back and forth in the attic. He stuck his head up into the attic and saw nothing. It was sealed with no windows. This house had been built in the 1700s and had went through a lot of owners. After he'd gotten a couple rooms finished upstairs, my mother and I joined him, staying in the 2 bedrooms that were complete. My father never told my mother what had happened. Up to that point, he didn't want to upset her. He was a musician, so he left for work around 7:30 in the evening. He often wouldn't get home until 2 a.m. One night my mother had all the lights on. She told him that we were not alone in this house. She heard someone sigh in another room. Another night my father was getting ready for work. He looked in the mirror to comb his hair, and he saw the figure of an old man, dressed in black, sitting in a Windsor rocker. The man had white hair, and his face was blurry. Looking back, I remember my sister, who was born while we were living there, often speaking in a language that I didn't understand while she was asleep. Perhaps the oddest part of the story was one night when my father was asleep on the couch. My mother was asleep in the upstairs bedroom, and my sister and I were in the other 2 upstairs bedrooms. My father was asleep when he felt a pressure on his chest, like someone taking their hands and pressing down. He couldn't wake up, but when he finally did, he assumed it was one of our cats, and then he saw that all 4 were asleep, locked up on the screened-in back porch. The next day at the breakfast table, my mother said that she had felt something weird had happened the night before. She then proceeded to tell my father exactly what had happened to her. Pressure on her chest, the feeling like she couldn't wake up. They had both experienced the same thing in different parts of the house at the same time. The phone rang a short time later. Our neighbor down the street, who had a telescope in his window, had seen some strange lights over our house. He said he put his jacket on so he could come over and tell us, but the lights had vanished by the time he got outside. Now, was this UFO that had nothing to do with the fact that the house was haunted? Or were the two somehow linked? There had been UFO sightings in the area before. My father and I had seen things in broad daylight on a couple of occasions. My parents divorced in the early 70s, and a year later, they sold the house. My parents never told the people who bought the house about any of the strange things that happened. They told us a couple months later, when we invited them to a party. They said that they knew they were not alone in that house, that weird things kept happening. They lived there for many years until the husband died, and then they sold the house. And they didn't tell the new owners that anything was odd in the house. The new owners? Well, they called the neighbors to say that they've been hearing weird ringing, like a bell or something, that they can't seem to locate. The story continues. Story 3. The Singing Lady. This story took place at a house that me and my family lived at when I was a very young girl. The house was over 100 years old. When we moved in, my father had a lot of work to do on it. While tearing out a wall separating the kitchen and the stairway leading upstairs, he found an old necklace hanging on a board inside the wall. We took the necklace to a local jeweler because there was writing on the clasp that we couldn't make out. The jeweler told us that the stamp on the clasp was from an old jeweler in Ireland and that it was probably at least 100 years old. He said it was a custom back then to hide something in a structure of newly built houses to bring good luck and prosperity to the owners and to keep bad spirits away. My father gave me the necklace when we sold the house some years later. After finding the necklace and finishing up the work on the house, some family members started hearing things when one of us was home alone. At first, we just chalked it up to noises of an old house. But there was this one bedroom upstairs, the only bedroom on the back side of the house. My dad didn't get to fixing up that room right away because it was always so cold in there. So we ended up using it for storage for many years until my mother got the great idea to redo that room for me. She put in nice shag carpeting and beads on the closet door. She made it nice for a teenager's room, but that room always gave me the creeps for some reason. But to please my mother, I made it my domain. When I'd be sleeping in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and have this great feeling that there was something in there with me. I would go running into my sister's room as fast as I could in the pitch dark. And as I was running, I would hear my name being whispered in my ears in a long, slow, dragged out manner. It scared the hell out of me. I started sleeping with my sister more and more. I just didn't like my room at all. Later on, my mother started caring for some elderly people, and she gave my room to one of those people. Mary always slept with the door shut at night because some of the other ladies would snore and keep her awake. One morning at breakfast, Mary was complaining that she didn't get much sleep at night due to all the snoring. My mother asked, "Well, why didn't you close your door, Mary, like you always have?" And Mary said, "Well, ma'am, I didn't want to say anything, but sometimes I hear voices in my room at night." Not long after that, I was sleeping in my sister's room, and I heard this young woman singing this kind of happy, sweet lullaby in the hallway. It was loud, too. It woke me up out of a sound sleep. The next thing I know, the door started squeaking open. My heart was racing. It was my mom, poking her head in to ask me if I'd heard the singing, too. She checked on all of the women, and they were all sound asleep. We started to ask our neighbors. Many of them had lived in the neighborhood for a lot longer than we had, and we found out that a young woman, a relative of one of the neighbors, had died in that very room during childbirth. We still continue to hear stuff in the house, but we're not as afraid anymore. We feel sorry for her. She must be looking for her child, and that's sad. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. And if you'd like to share your own story, send me an email at hauntedfamilypodcast@gmail.com. Bye.